Imagine waking up in the morning, swinging your legs over the side of the bed, and feeling that familiar ache grip your knees, hips, or hands before you even stand. For many people over 50, this stiffness feels like a thief that shows up overnight and never leaves, stealing independence, joy, and the freedom to simply move. You might be told it's just aging, but what if that's not the whole truth? What if there's a natural key hidden in plain sight that could help unlock more mobility, more comfort, more life? I'm Dr. Brian, and welcome to Channel Wellness Blueprint Over 50. Today we're going to explore something ancient yet surprisingly modern: turmeric, the golden spice. You've probably heard whispers of its power, but you may not realize just how deeply it can change lives. Stay with me, because the stories you're about to hear may just change yours. Jane was 62 when she first came to me, her eyes tired from years of frustration. She had been living with knee arthritis for nearly a decade, and though she wore a smile, I could see the weight of her pain in the way she lowered herself into the chair, carefully as if every joint carried a secret burden. For Jane, arthritis wasn't just about pain, it was about loss. She had once loved gardening, kneeling among her flowers, and strolling around the neighborhood with her husband in the evenings. But over time, those simple joys were replaced by stiffness, fatigue, and a gnawing sense that her world was shrinking. She had tried what most people try: over-the-counter medications that dulled the ache for a little while, but never gave her back her freedom. Physical therapy had helped some, but the relief never lasted. When she came to me, she confessed something that broke my heart. "Doctor," she said softly, "I feel like I'm living smaller and smaller each year. I'm not afraid of aging, but I am afraid of losing myself in this pain." That fear is something I hear often, and it's not unfounded. Arthritis isn't just about swollen joints. It steals independence. One stare, one walk, one hobby at a time. But here's where Jane's story takes a hopeful turn. She had read about turmeric, a spice tucked away in many kitchens, but celebrated for centuries in traditional medicine. At first, she was skeptical. After all, how could something so ordinary, something sitting in a spice jar, possibly make a difference where years of medication hadn't? But curiosity nudged her forward. Jane started small, stirring turmeric into her soups and teas. She even added it to her morning smoothies, the bright golden color reminding her of sunshine. Later, she began taking turmeric supplements, paired with black pepper, which helps the body absorb its active compound, curcumin, more effectively. She told me she approached it with cautious hope, almost whispering to herself, "Maybe this will help." And something remarkable happened. After just a few weeks, Jane noticed that the morning stiffness that had once chained her to the bed was loosening its grip. The swelling in her knees seemed less angry, less insistent. By the end of the first month, she realized she could walk longer distances without stopping, and even more surprising, she started to feel joy again when moving. "I went back into the garden," she said, her eyes lighting up, "and for the first time in years, it didn't end in pain." Now let me pause here. As a physician, was this magic? No, it was science meeting persistence. Research has shown that curcumin, the compound in turmeric, has powerful anti-inflammatory effects. In fact, a study published in the journal Phytotherapy Research found that curcumin provided pain relief in patients with knee osteoarthritis, comparable to ibuprofen, but with fewer side effects. That means what Jane experienced wasn't just in her head, it was in her body, in her very cells, where inflammation had been cooling down like a fire finally losing its fuel. Months later, Jane's life looked different. She still had arthritis, of course. It doesn't vanish overnight. But her relationship with it had changed. She no longer relied on daily pain medication. She could garden, walk, and even play with her grandchildren without that constant shadow of discomfort. "I feel free again," she told me, and I never thought I'd say that at 62. Her story is a reminder that sometimes the tools to rebuild our lives are closer than we think. For Jane, turmeric wasn't just a spice, it was a key that helped unlock the door to movement, independence, and a sense of hope she thought she had lost forever. Mark's story is one that always brings a smile to my face because it captures something many people fear losing: the ability to keep doing what they love. Mark was only 45, a younger patient than many I see, but years of pounding the pavement as a marathon runner had caught up with him. Running had been his passion, his therapy, his joy. Yet slowly, the very thing that gave him freedom began to take it away. The aches in his knees started as whispers after long runs, but grew louder with time until even short jogs felt like punishment. Eventually, the pain became so severe that Mark had to stop running altogether. For someone who had identified himself as a runner for decades, it felt like part of his identity was stripped away. When he visited his orthopedic specialist, the diagnosis was osteoarthritis. The words hung heavy in the air. Osteoarthritis doesn't come with a quick fix, and Mark's options were limited. Physical therapy, cortisone injections, and the long shadow of possibly facing surgery in the future. He tried the injections. He worked with therapists. Yet no matter what, the sharp ache in his knees returned, stubborn and unrelenting. "Doc," he said to me once, his voice tinged with frustration, "I just want to run without wincing at every step. Is that too much to ask?" It's a question many ask, and I could feel his heartbreak. But here's where Mark's story takes an unexpected turn. Unlike many who come across turmeric by accident, Mark actively went searching for alternatives. He was determined to find something beyond the cycle of injections and pills. That's when he stumbled across their studies on turmeric, specifically curcumin, and its potential for joint pain relief. Skeptical but curious, he decided to give it a shot. Mark began with turmeric supplements, always paired with black pepper to boost absorption. He also started making turmeric tea after his workouts, describing it as a golden reward at the end of the day. Within weeks, he noticed subtle shifts. The inflammation in his knees wasn't screaming as loudly. The stiffness that usually settled in after sitting for long periods started to ease. Encouraged, he stuck with it, giving his body time to respond. As a physician, I often remind patients that healing is rarely a sprint. It's a marathon in itself. And ironically, that's exactly what Mark rediscovered. After about 6 weeks, he decided to test the waters with a short run. He laced up his shoes, nervous but hopeful, and set out for just half a mile. To his surprise, he finished without the searing pain that had once forced him to quit. That first run was a turning point. Slowly, he increased his distance. First a mile, then 3, then 5. He paced himself carefully, always listening to his body. With turmeric as part of his routine, the inflammation remained calmer, more manageable. He described it to me once with a metaphor I'll never forget. "It's like my knees used to be angry drums, pounding with every step. Now they're softer, like a gentle beat I can dance to again." Science backs up his experience. Multiple studies, including one published in the Journal of Medicinal Food, have shown that turmeric can significantly reduce symptoms of joint pain in patients with osteoarthritis. For athletes like Mark, it offers a way to manage inflammation naturally without relying heavily on medications that can come with side effects. Months later, Mark wasn't just running again. He was thriving. He hadn't jumped back into marathons, but he was back to daily runs that left him smiling instead of limping. Perhaps even more powerful than the physical relief was the emotional restoration. Running wasn't just exercise for Mark. It was his way of connecting with himself, of clearing his mind, of feeling alive. "Turmeric gave me back my rhythm," he told me. "I thought I'd lost it forever." Mark's journey shows us that while pain may slow us down, it doesn't have to stop us. With patience, persistence, and sometimes the help of something as humble as a golden spice, we can return to the things that light our souls on fire. Lisa was 50 when she walked into my office, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea she held as if it were both a comfort and a weight. She had been battling rheumatoid arthritis since her early 40s, and the years had etched fatigue into her face. Unlike osteoarthritis, which often comes from wear and tear, rheumatoid arthritis is an autoimmune condition, a storm from within where the body's defenses mistakenly attack the very joints meant to carry us through life. For Lisa, this storm was constant. Her hands were swollen, her wrists stiff, and tasks as simple as typing or lifting a coffee mug could leave her wincing. She told me something that struck me deeply. "It feels like my body has turned against me. I used to love painting and yoga, but now I measure my day by what hurts least." That's the reality of rheumatoid arthritis. It doesn't just steal comfort, it steals identity, creativity, joy. Lisa had already walked a long road of treatments. She had tried prescription pain relievers, disease-modifying drugs, and even biologics. Some helped, but the side effects left her drained, nauseous, and unwell. "I don't want to choose between pain and feeling sick from the medications," she said, her voice breaking. "There has to be another way." It was during this search for another path that she discovered turmeric. She had read articles online, stumbled across forums where people shared their experiences, and decided, almost out of desperation, to give it a chance. She began by adding turmeric to her meals, curries, soups, even her morning smoothie. Soon she included supplements, carefully checking labels and making sure they contained curcumin paired with black pepper for better absorption. The first few weeks were quiet. No miracles, no sudden disappearance of pain. But around week 3, Lisa began to notice something subtle. The swelling in her hands felt less angry in the mornings. She could grip her coffee mug without that sharp jolt of pain. By week 5, she realized she hadn't reached for her painkillers as often. Her energy, once drained by both pain and medication, began to flicker back to life. By the 2-month mark, Lisa's story had shifted. She wasn't cured. Rheumatoid arthritis doesn't vanish with a spice. But she was empowered. She had resumed walking in the evenings, something she had avoided for months. More astonishing to her was the return of yoga, a practice she had mourned as lost. Slowly, gently, she moved back into poses, marveling that her body could still bend, stretch, and find peace. "I feel like I've reclaimed a piece of myself," she told me, tears glistening in her eyes. Science supports what Lisa felt. Studies have shown that curcumin has not only anti-inflammatory properties, but also antioxidant effects, which can be especially beneficial in autoimmune conditions. A review in the journal Frontiers in Immunology highlighted how curcumin can modulate immune system activity, reducing the overactive response that drives conditions like rheumatoid arthritis. It's not a cure, but it's a powerful ally. One day, Lisa brought me a small canvas she had painted, a golden field of flowers with streaks of orange and yellow. She laughed as she handed it to me, saying, "I guess turmeric even found its way into my art." It wasn't just a painting, it was a symbol of resilience, of how something as simple as a spice could open the door to living fully again. Lisa's journey reminds us that healing is rarely about eliminating every symptom. Sometimes it's about shifting the balance. Less pain, more energy, and the return of small joys that make life rich. For her, turmeric was a bridge back to herself, and that is something science alone cannot measure. George was 75 when I first met him, and he carried the quiet dignity of someone who had weathered many storms. Yet beneath that dignity was frustration. His hips had been betraying him for years, worn down by arthritis until even standing up from a chair felt like climbing a mountain. He relied on a walker, moving slowly from room to room, each step a reminder of what he had lost. "Doctor," he sighed, "I never imagined that walking across my own living room would feel like running a marathon." For George, the hardest part wasn't only the pain, it was the shrinking of his world. Once he had loved strolling through the park with his grandchildren, bending down to tie their shoelaces, lifting them onto his lap for stories. But the arthritis had stolen that ease, leaving him dependent, frustrated, and at times defeated. He admitted, "I feel like my body has locked me inside a smaller and smaller box." When I suggested turmeric, George was skeptical. After all, how could a spice he had sprinkled on food decades ago possibly compete with years of pain? But what struck me about George was his willingness to try. "At my age," he chuckled softly, "I'll take hope wherever I can find it." So he began. He started with daily turmeric supplements and made a ritual of brewing turmeric tea each morning, always adding a pinch of black pepper. It wasn't dramatic at first, but he enjoyed the warmth of the tea, the sense that he was taking an active step toward reclaiming himself. After 3 weeks, George noticed a difference. The pain hadn't vanished, but it was no longer a constant roar. It had softened to a murmur. The stiffness that gripped his hips each morning began to ease. By the end of the first month, something remarkable happened. George realized he wasn't leaning so heavily on his walker. He started taking short steps unaided, then longer ones, testing his limits with careful courage. 2 months in, he had transitioned to a cane. "I feel lighter," he told me one afternoon, "as if my hips finally remembered how to move." For the first time in years, he could bend down to tie his shoes without wincing. Even getting in and out of the car, once a struggle, became manageable. The science behind his transformation lies, once again, in curcumin's anti-inflammatory power. Inflammation is like rust in the body. It stiffens, corrodes, and limits movement. By reducing that inflammation, turmeric helps restore flexibility and reduces pain. A study in the Annals of Internal Medicine noted that older adults with arthritis who incorporated anti-inflammatory nutrition into their routines experienced greater mobility and independence. George became living proof of this, but perhaps the most touching moment came when George shared a story about his grandchildren. One Sunday they visited, and for the first time in years, he walked with them through the park without his walker. "I didn't have to sit on the bench and watch," he said, his voice breaking with emotion. "I walked with them. I was part of their world again." Turmeric didn't just soothe his joints. It gave him back his role as a grandfather, his independence, his joy. George still takes his turmeric daily, not because he believes it's a miracle, but because it's a steady companion in his journey of resilience. His story reminds us that it's never too late. At 75, George discovered that even small, natural steps can lead to monumental changes. Mobility isn't just about moving your body, it's about moving back into life, into family, into freedom. For George, a simple golden spice helped him open that door again. So what do these journeys tell us? Whether it was Jane tending her garden again, Mark lacing up his running shoes, Lisa returning to her yoga mat, or George walking proudly beside his grandchildren, each found new freedom through something as simple yet powerful as turmeric. The science is clear. Its curcumin compound cools the fires of inflammation, easing joint pain and stiffness, and the stories are real. Ordinary people reclaiming their independence, one golden step at a time. If you're living with arthritis pain or struggling for joint pain relief, know this: hope is not behind you, it is within reach. I'm Dr. Brian, and this is Wellness Blueprint Over 50. If this message touched you, please like, comment, and subscribe, and share your own turmeric story in the comments below. Here's to better mobility, brighter days, and a healthier you, because it's never too late to move freely again.